is dedicated to content marketing and something I'm really passionate about, storytelling. When we have so much going on in our busy lives, I'm so pleased there's still a huge power involved in telling a story in the right way to make people stop, listen, and think, what's it all about? To chair the panel, someone you've already met, make them very welcome, Creative Businesses Director, Rosa Mitchell. Rosa, all yours.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all again. So I have the honour today to host this fantastic panel. We've got really, really amazing people with lots of years of experience who've worked with fantastic brands. And we're going to talk about content marketing and storytelling and how everyone uses it in their day-to-day lives, how it's going to change in the future, and anything to do with AI as well, which we know everyone loves talking about when it comes to these conferences at the moment. So Sue, do you want to start with you? Do you want to give yourself a bit of an intro?
Yes, my name is Sue Souter. I'm an Associate Director at the Jargon Group. We have a tech B2B side and a sustainability side of our business, and we're content specialists. My background is 30 years in PR. Prior to that, I was a journalist, so I've always brought news and that kind of headline driving to content production and programmes, and I just love it. I'm passionate about it.
Fabulous. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I currently work at a law firm, which has its challenges in storytelling and content, which I'll get onto. But before that, I was a freelancer, so I've worked across lots of different industries. I started life in tech, PR, coincidentally, we've just discovered. And so learning how to talk about content that people can understand and make it into a story that is actually interesting is always a challenge that I've started from, which I've continued through my career.
Fab. And Anna?
Hi there, I'm Anna. I'm Head of Comms at Agent. I have got a background in PR and communications. Prior to working at Agent, I was at Tiger Bond, which is an international comms agency, where I delivered PR campaigns for big brands such as Biffa, Specsavers and Co-op. So sort of storytelling is at the heart of everything I've done, and kind of creating and working smart with content is also a massive part of that as well.
Fantastic, thank you very much. How lucky are we to have you three on the panel today. So content marketing and storytelling, it's a very, very broad topic. Content marketing makes me think of blogs and on-site content, and storytelling sounds very whimsical and a little bit storybook, which I love. So to give everyone a bit of an idea about what you do work in, can you tell me, Sue, you first, how you use content marketing and storytelling in your day-to-day job?
Well, it's absolutely central to everything that we do, all the programmes of work that we run. So, for example, this morning I was talking to conference organisers for a major tech show in London, which starts in 2 weeks. We're 11 days and counting. And there is so much content around that show. The job is to actually make sure which is the best bit of content, doing all that prioritising, how do we know what's great and what will work. And so content is kind of in our day-to-day all the time. And the reason I mentioned the news side and why a good sense of what makes a headline is important is making sure that you're going for the best content and you're making it most interesting, and being able to explain to a client why that is not interesting and this would be a much better way of going about it. So that is all in our day-to-day.
Lovely. I love that you've got the journalist background and the PR background. It's usually the best people to deal with.
It helps.
It can be at odds sometimes, like journalists and PRs. Michelle, do you want to go next?
So as I said, I work in a law firm, and we're on a journey at the moment of trying to get lawyers not to be frightened about the content that they share, etc. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at the people, because at the end of the day in the professional services it's all about the people. So we're trying to say to them, right, you don't want the stuff that you want everyone to read about is actually quite dull. People buy people. So let's start talking about the actual people in the office and what they're doing, so that other people want to find out more about us. So that's what we're doing a lot of at the moment, and telling the stories of when they've gone and visited a place for sick animals and so on, and how they've helped out there and things like that. And so all the CSR stuff and things like that. So that's what we're concentrating on in storytelling at the moment.
Yeah, as a head of comms, I oversee a team that's social, PR, copywriting and paid media. So it's all about kind of making sure that we're a very agile team, basically. We're always communicating with each other, making sure that messages are going out across all channels in the best possible way, basically. So it's very much about being agile and on top of the messaging and making sure that that's kind of delivered and we're not missing any opportunities at all.
Fantastic. I love that we've got three slightly different ideas of how you work with content marketing day to day as well, depending on the role, which I think is going to make for a really interesting conversation. I started off as a content writer about 10 years ago in my role, and I used to do things like 17 different guest posts for blogs with a DA of like 6 to get a link back. And I remember the SEO team doing keyword spamming, and it was a very, very different place back then. So as someone who's worked in both journalism and PR and kind of lots of different areas in that, can you tell us how you've found content marketing and storytelling to have changed over the last 10 years?
Yeah, of course. I think content is right at the heart of marketing now. I think that's what we've seen in the last 10 years. And also the channels that have proliferated on, with the internet. So now a story is what can, as you were saying, Anna, it's what you can do with the story. So, and how far we can take it. So I think the last 10 years has seen an amazing kind of interest in content. I think clients are coming around to the idea that content is actually really important and is a strong differentiator. And I kind of sort of think about that because as you've just said, Michelle, it's about the people. What's different is about the people. So how can we do that? And the other thing is that I think agencies are started to push it at the heart of things. So we work with lots of different agencies and have done, and PR was always the bridesmaid, and the advertising people got all the dosh, and the cake was like that, and we got this little tiny sliver. Well, now the advertising people are looking at story and seeing how they can amplify it. It's all turned on its head. So I think it's a major and really interesting time to be in content.
I completely agree, and I think we've been able to see some brands build themselves up from content only,
Yes.
which is one of the first times we've kind of seen that, rather than ploughing so much money into advertising and PPC and that kind of thing. No offence, Mitchell.
Yeah, I just think just the point about media is you take the filter of media out of things, and we are all publishers now, so we can do it. And you see that on sort of social channels, that how movements can emerge from social channels because they can gather momentum and attention very quickly. So it's a very interesting time to be using those tools.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings me really nicely onto my next question. So Anna, you mentioned that you work across a lot of different formats when it comes to content,
Yeah.
so social media, on-site, blogs. Would you be able to explain the different ways that you use content and how they have kind of like different impacts?
Yeah, definitely. I think firstly, within the kind of the communications team, we're all content creators. So everybody is creating content, and everyone kind of does it in a different way depending on the channel they're working with. And I think we've got to be really smart with content, and we've got to have a strategy there. We've got to be very strategic with how we deal with it. So it's about kind of looking at what the messages are, making sure they're kind of consistent across all channels, and then delivering content that is specific to the audience you're talking to and the audience that engages with that channel, and making that content and adapting it accordingly to that audience. So I think that's massively important.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you find that you find it better to have people dedicated to one discipline, or content writers trained across all of them?
That's quite an interesting question at the moment, because we're sort of having a look at our team right now, and while we have people dedicated to each area of content, often they do other bits of content as well. They're pretty agile and they're open to that as well, because I think they understand the bigger picture. They might be doing content for performance marketing posts, for example, but then they know that writing a blog related to that topic is also really important, and kind of linking it all together and things. So I think it's kind of thinking about it in that way as kind of a bit of a helicopter view, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, a bit of a tough question for you. So you mentioned before about working for solicitors, and you kind of have to create content that's probably slightly different from the day-to-day and the minutiae of the law. So how do you find that you can create content from nothing?
Well, as I said, we look at what people are doing in their teams and so on. But there's always ways of creating content from nothing. I'm not going to go specifically through the law idea of it, but if you've done content in the past, that can become new content because you can refresh it, you can review it, you can talk about, when we talked about this 5 years ago, what's changed? That's content straight away. One of my favourite things, though, is think about something that you can find some stats on, i.e. a poll or a survey, and create one, and then you get some content that is created from nothing. We all have something that people want to go and find out something about that's got some figures against it. So if you can create a survey or a poll, that's another way of doing it. And I know you're going to touch on it, but people, if you are trying to target an audience, they are reading stuff that they're interested in. So you go and read that, and then you think about, how can I comment on it? What can I say in addition to what someone else has already said about it? and then, or you can create a whole new picture around it. And those are 3 just easy wins of how to create content when you've got nothing, when you sit looking at a blank piece of paper. Just go out and think about how you can do a survey and look at what's out there already and what can you say different about it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. In my talk, I was mentioning about making sure you're doing your research and you understand your audience and exactly what they're going to be wanting to read about and understand. And, you know, you do face those creative barriers sometimes where you're trying to come up with a great content idea and you just can't break through. But doing that research, understanding your audience are 2 of the most important things, and I love a good survey. It saved my life many a time.
I think it's definitely about being really topical as well and understanding what's important to your client and what they can really expertly comment on and that kind of thing. I think that's, you know, a really, really easy opportunity potentially. For us to,
definitely. And media do that as well, you know, future features, and we subscribe to something called Response Source, which is journalists actually coming out and asking for information. So you then know what's trending and what's, you know, coming next, and also how soon journalists plan ahead. So, you know, and that's one of the issues I was chatting to someone just earlier about people being prepared and not feeling rushed into content production. Is that which is back to that strategy piece, isn't it? You know, and making sure that everyone is prepared. And also the person who's most comfortable, get them to talk about what they're most comfortable about talking about, you know, and have multiple experts who are prepared to say something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess just going off on a bit of a segue, do you, the question to everyone, do you use Newsjack and how effective have you found that?
Yeah, we use it, and it's increasingly common. You need very agile clients who are able, with a bit of pre-preparation, you know, areas that you're definitely going to pick up on, and people who are good on their feet and who can respond very quickly. So we've had a recent example of that with a company called Leonard Curtis that we work with. So their CEO, who's a brilliant man, actually really at ease, even though he kind of presides over a very complex service set. He just stepped into a comments piece opportunity for the BBC on Wilco. So it wasn't his administration, it wasn't their big sort of restructuring project, but he was able to comment on it like that. You know, I'm talking to him at 7 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock at night, it's happening at 7 in the morning. It's that sort of thing. So with agile clients can be brilliant.
Yeah, but it's a real problem if it isn't. And
so don't bother with it.
It's really, and also what you said, you need that person that is quite happy to also just say the right thing and not be too concerned about that could happen, what the result of it is. So I worked in a diversity and inclusivity employment, and the CEO of that company, he would just say whatever he wanted. And the other good thing was he'd say a lot of contentious commentary. So that would actually get picked up, and people, he would say things that was really challenging so that people would get back. And that's another way about the newsjacking. In order to get your content heard, you don't just blandly respond to it. You've got to say something that's different and possibly will cause a few eyes to be raised.
Absolutely,
I think it's about trust as well. Like we had an example of newsjacking this week. We worked with Net Zero Northwest and obviously all the chats with Rishi Sunak about the kind of backtracking on the goals and things. So we did a comment for their CEO, Jed Barlow, and we kind of write comments for him quite frequently, and he does really trust us to kind of write something that he's happy with. So it was that thing about being quite agile in a quick process, and he made minor tweaks and approved it pretty quick. So we got some nice sort of local business coverage that they were really pleased with. So so that's a good one.
It's so great when you've got a client and the news agenda just fits in with them perfectly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just brilliant. So you've done all your amazing newsjacking, you've got loads of commentary, you've got great blogs, you've got a strategy. It's all worked out really well, and you're standing in front of your stakeholders and they're like, well, what does this mean? Like, what does it mean? So the question is, how, each of you, do you measure content effectively? Do you want to go first, Sue?
Okay. Well, of course, on digitally, it's super analysable. Is that a word? So you can see engagement in real time happening. So on sort of social channels, we can see it, and so that engagement is real, and you know, so the client will go, oh, at the end of the week, how did that go? So, or whatever. So that's really easy. The media side of it is, you know, it's coverage, it's a piece of editorial. We always campaign that a journalist's view endorsing us is worth having. So we put a value on that, not necessarily an advertising value. It's more about a influential reputation building type of value. So we'd also go back to the client with that. And also prior to that, you've got your media. You know who you need to be talking to. So we need that journalist on side. We need that, and being very specific about those. So then your measurement is relatively straightforward.
I think the important thing, taking a step back, is have that agreement up front of what success looks like. So it's like, one of the examples I give a lot is I had a junior person who was really excited because they got coverage in the Financial Times, which is great. However, the client distinctly said, I'm not bothered about the Financial Times. So from our point of view, great, we got a bit of coverage, but we'd failed with the client because they'd specified upfront what it was they wanted. It could have been some really small trade publication that they wanted us to get into. So it's, for me, it's let's get an agreement upfront of what success looks like, and then when you're finished, you know you've been successful, and then all of those things will come into it, but you've got to know what you're headed for before you get there.
Definitely. I think really clear briefing as well is vital. Again, going back to the point around messaging and making sure you're getting the messaging right, you can measure on messages as well. And the worst thing is if you kind of get a broadcast opportunity, for example, and your client or spokesperson chats through for ages and doesn't mention your client, then that is just awful. So you really need to brief them within an inch of their life, basically, and kind of, you know, practice with them, rehearse with them, make sure they're comfortable, and make sure that they're going to kind of give you what you need them to, basically.
I've got a question for you guys, though. What do you do when somebody insists on being a spokesperson and you know they're absolutely useless?
Point them in the direction of the very small trade publication. So damage limitation. Or coaching.
Yeah.
You know,
coaching doesn't always work.
Well,
and sometimes, and I would say, actually, what you said this earlier, identify the person that's best for the job.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be the CEO necessarily.
Yeah.
And from when you're trying to build reputations with journalists, they just want somebody that's going to give them those sound bites. And if it's not your CEO, but your company's still going to get mentioned, then it's our job to convince the CEO that you're better off doing X and we'll use him for that sort of thing. It's a hard conversation to have. But I suggest that.
I suppose it is about being honest, isn't it? But it is really, really difficult as well. But I guess, you know, certain people are good at certain things, and that's kind of the bottom line, really, isn't it? So.
And I think certain audiences respond well to different types of people as well, which is it's a learning to tell the stakeholders. So I'm going to have to ask it the big question, and everyone's talked about it, and we're going to be talking about it for the next few months, AI in content marketing. So I've got a few questions on it. I'm sure we'll get to them all. How do you think AI is going to affect content and storytelling in future? Anna, do you want to take that one first?
I guess with AI, I think we've got to be quite progressive about it, as well as not, you know, rather than being scared and fearful. I think we should see it as a tool that can really help us speed certain processes up. But, you know, at the end of the day, you can't beat a human. So we've got to say that, obviously. But, you know, you can't really, you have to use it alongside as a tool, and I think that will kind of continue. I think some media outlets and information outlets are already putting kind of guardrails up around AI content anyway, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there and how the kind of AI tools navigate around that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were talking about the kind of fencing off the AI content, do you think there should be more regulations in place in terms of AI content?
Probably, yeah, I think so, because it's such a new thing, isn't it? So, I mean, I don't know masses about it, but I do know that, you know, sometimes it gets things very, very wrong, and that's really dangerous when you're, you know, when people who aren't, you know, don't really understand it, or, you know, there's just a lot of room for error potentially, isn't there, if it's not properly regulated, and people's or businesses might be misrepresented, which is kind of takes away authenticity and things, which isn't good. So
absolutely.
I mean, AI is getting information off that internet thing, and if you think about it, for instance, Wikipedia has information on it that is provided by a human being, and then the AI goes along and uses that information to create something. So there is a lot of room for error. And to what you said, you have to humanise it, because even though it's amazing, it's sometimes pretty obvious that it's not been humanised, and that's so. Yes, to get to the start, it does speed on things and takes us to a level quicker than it used to take us. But I think let's put it this way: I don't think we're going to be out of a job.
I think there's a real challenge with it. I think ChatGPT, for example, we've just worked on a policy for the agency to explain to people how we want them to use it and embrace it. And if it's a subject matter that you've never got any experience on, as a good starting point, it's kind of one step further than just Google searching yourself, isn't it? But we're saying we have to, and I mean, it's about generating unique content, and that's a really challenging thing. But working closely with a client to get something that's current and ready and authentic and now, then helps you kind of beat the kind of the AI issues, which is about everybody saying the same things. And I mean, media, we're getting pushback from both sides. Journalists are saying, we're watching out for it, don't give us anything like that. And our clients are saying, oh, maybe I could do ChatGPT myself.
Yeah.
So why do I need you? You know. So I'm saying to our people, we need to be adding value and finding other ways to add value to our content writing. And the writing needs to be really good. You know, we try and employ people who are really, really good at writing. And I know that sounds dead obvious, but the profession doesn't always deliver that. So I think that's our challenge. We have got to create great copy and great content.
Yeah, so in a way, AI could be making us even better at our jobs.
Well, I'd like to think we have to work with it, which
Yeah.
is the point you made.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should be fearful, as you say. I think it's about embracing it and using it and
Yeah.
being very upfront with journalists and clients saying, well, we've used it, but this is how we are now building on it and bringing something fresh to the party.
I heard a very good quote, and I feel bad because I can't remember who it's from, but it was, AI is not going to replace you in your job, but people who can work with AI might. And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it.
I know,
That's
yeah.
a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry if it was anyone here who said it. I can't remember. They'll look up on AI who said it. Yeah, it's really interesting. And one of my questions was going to be, are you worried about the rise in AI in content marketing? But I think you've all answered that. It's not something to be scared of, it's something to work with and potentially push you to be even better at your role, which I think is a really positive way of looking at it, which is nice.
Yeah,
Not
I
like
think so.
Terminator, Skynet kind of thing, which is good. So kind of to round up, I think we've had some really, really good advice and really interesting conversations here. If I was to ask each of you if there was one piece of advice you'd give to a content writer to really make your content stand out in the sea of millions upon millions of words that the internet is, and I know this is a very specific question, but what piece of advice would you give? Is there anyone who wants to go first?
I suppose to try, you've got to be unique, really, and not same old, which is really hard. But it's a case of, I flip it on its head. Think about the things that you read. Think about things that grab your attention and what you like to look at and everything. And usually it's got a bit of scandal in it, or it's really unusual out there. Problem is, the best people at doing this is the clickbait stuff, really. But it's a case of not clickbait as in go to it and then that content is nothing to do with it, but actually have that headline and then have that story in there that really grabs your attention, and that when you get to it, you want to share that information on. That's the best type of content. The stuff I've read that I've gone, oh, you've got to read this. And then so when you're writing anything, think, would anyone else want to read this, or is it just interesting to me? And I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I'd just add, kind of coming from a bit of a strategic point of view, what differentiates you? What is the thing that you want to own that makes you different from anybody else? And hammer that home and find some really creative ways of getting that across. So I don't know that actually it's about standout content, more about sort of how do you stand it out in the firm and get people behind it. And I think, enthusiasts for content in business, gold dust. So nurture them, bring them on, encourage them, and then the content will hopefully fly.
Yeah, perfect.
I think sometimes bringing kind of a guest into the mix, if you're talking about magazines or blogs or that kind of thing, then just bringing someone fresh to the table, someone new and interesting that will make, to your guys' points, that everyone sort of sit up and notice, really, and bring that different opinion and sort of someone quite inspiring, I guess.
Fabulous. No, that's brilliant. I think we've got about 2 minutes left if anyone has any questions for the panel at all. Yeah, of course.
So we're all have a bit of an attention deficit at the moment, and there's no statistics about the time in which we can gain content. Have you seen things change in terms of content length or formats over the last couple of years, I guess, in the way that we consume content on platforms like TikTok? Is that how you guys?
Yeah, you always need a 30-second version of something.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Definitely.
You know, it's actually about chunking the content down so that you can actually engage with it wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I'm a massive fan of print still. You know. So a kind of somewhere you sit down and read something, that's fab. But actually, equally, we need a 10-second tweet over here for the same content. So which is what Anna's team do, you know, really well. They kind of chunk it down to decide where it's going to go. So just being mindful of that is really key. Audience again, you know, if you're selling to lawyers, they may be more looking at, you know, or whatever. And that's speaking broadly, but you know, it's definitely short, but also long form if you can.
Yeah, I would have said years ago when I first started getting into the content, it was short, nobody's got time. But now you can go on reams, and we'll all have noticed it. It tells you how long it's going to take you to read an article before you get stuck into it. And yes, you do need it in all different formats. And that's not just about the way that you're sending that out, whether it be Twitter or LinkedIn or what have you. It's also about who's reading it, because I personally like to scan the first paragraph and then I've got what I need and I'll move on. But other people need the whole detail, so you need to think about who's going to be looking at it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely like the structure of kind of different types of content per channel, and then that will determine the length, I guess, as well, and that has kind of evolved a little bit over time.
Yeah, perfect. Any other questions at all to round off?
Yeah, just wondering where video and podcasts and that kind of thing fits in this.
Oh, massive. More. We do more, don't we? I think that we are doing it already. The internet is a hugely visual medium. Why don't we tell more stories with video? And that's confidence with clients, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's and having people who are good at that, who can front up, who are prepared to do that. And then podcasts obviously just give you an audio version of that. We're developing podcast series for clients now. In the professional service sector, no one would ever done that, you know, 5-10 years ago. So I just think, loads of opportunities there.
I was struggling with this because we've been talking about it as this. Well, not this, but the digital form of it. But actually, content really is now video and visual, and that's what you really need to do. But you still need to think about the words. You know, just because you've got a video, you still got to think about what it's going to say and what's going to be coming out of the person's mouth that's talking and so on. But it's just the way forward. It's just visual is it. I mean, content is brilliant. There's far too much of it, and we've all got to wade our ways through it. So snippets of video and stuff like that helps with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd agree, definitely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, can we have a big round of applause for our fantastic panellists? Thank you very much, guys. That was brilliant.
Yeah, you're free. You've done your time. You're okay. Well, thanks to our panel. More compliments for journalists, which I'm absolutely delighted about. You can stay up here and say nice things about journalists for as long as you like. That's brilliant. And Sue, you're right. We're all publishers, and content is king. And I think it's really important that everyone in the room understands their audience and does their research. And it's also true, finding the right people to do your talking. And I think Pro Manchester today have really, really done that. They've found the right people to give the right messages. And hopefully you found this of value. And I've not put too much pressure on our next speaker, who's now not looking at me. Okay, that next speaker, it works with some huge brands, the likes of Ralph Lauren, Puma, Metrobank, Yorkshire Water, and many more. Andy Blenkinsop is the Chief Strategy Officer at MediaWorks, which has been ranked by The Drum as one of the top 5 digital agencies in the UK. Andy works with his clients to help them understand and embrace the latest digital trends so that they can then incorporate them into their marketing strategy. He's here today to talk about maximizing customer acquisition strategies by enhancing the customer's journeys. Andy, please, and no pressure.
Can I just test, is the mic working? I know mine was turned off. Can everybody hear me?